County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Reverend Todd Herzenberger from Bethesda Community Church in Fort Worth. Thank you very much for coming out today.
Thank you for having me. Let's all bow our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, let me first by saying thank you on behalf of all of those who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many abundant blessings that you have given us. Thank you for life itself and the measure of health that we need to fulfill our callings, and for also the friendships you have given us. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing the appropriate responsibilities. Thanks as well for the freedom to embrace you as our loving God. And Lord, most of all, thank you for dying on the cross so that we may have life and have it more abundantly. In the Scriptures, Lord, you said that we ought to pray and obey those in our governmental authorities, since you are the one who established those very authorities to promote peace, justice, and order. We pray for all of those in the county commissioner levels and all the other various levels of the county officials, and in particular for this assembled council. I'm asking, Lord, that you would graciously grant them the wisdom to govern amidst the conflicting interests and issues of our times. Grant them a keen thirst for justice and rightness. Grant them confidence in what is good and fitting. Grant them the ability to work together in harmony together, even when there is honest disagreement. And Lord, grant them personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before them today. I ask that you give them assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in this great Tarrant County. We pray this in the name above all names, in that wonderful name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Your Honor. The only announcement that we have is just to make sure that that everyone understands that the court will be going through its regular session this morning. We'll be going into closed, and then once we have completed closed session, we'll come back and take any action that we may need to take as relates to the closed session. Then we will be going into our work session today, and I estimate that our work session is going to take somewhere between an hour and 2 hours. So if you'll keep that in mind, and everyone who wants to remain to participate in, or at least to hear the work session, that's the schedule that's laid out this morning. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Board members, you have before you the regular minutes of our regular, or the minutes of our regular meeting on March the 19th.
Move approval. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Maines?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have one additional item this morning to present to the Court. Under the Administrator's Section Item 1, we're requesting that the Court approve the amended policy as it relates to hospital district real estate transaction and public works or construction projects.
Why are we moving it from 250 to 500?
I believe that we've talked about this in court, and it was the direction of the court to move it to 500. It would not require all the documents to come up to the court. There'll still be some documents coming up. The hospital district feels that it would be actually a cost saver because of legal expenses in those particular activities. And so that's what our direction was. And the only thing that we have done since the last policy was to increase that figure from 250,000 to 500,000.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah. How many instances have they brought us something that would fall into that area that would not now, between 250 and 500?
Yeah. I can't remember the exact number. There's not really a whole lot that we're looking at. As you know, we bring some issues to court, but a lot of those issues have stayed under the 250 range. And Commissioner, I don't have an exact count on that.
And this is only real estate and construction.
That's correct. That's correct.
And it's hard for me to, it's been a few years since we put this in place, but I do remember that there was a specific reason why we felt like we needed to do that and brought it down to the 250,000 level. I think that, since that period in time, as GK mentioned, I don't think there's been a whole lot of instances, and I think we can give them a little bit, more flexibility and as they kind of move forward with the deal.
There was an issue of management uncertainty at the hospital district at that time, and I believe that was a 98 or a 99 policy, and they've corrected that uncertainty.
I would be okay with this if we still got some sort of notification of items between 250 and 500,000. It doesn't have to appear for a vote, but I'd like to know about it.
Okay, we'll do that. And we'll make that available to all the court members.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Tidwell?
We have one item for the court's consideration this morning, and that is the Commissioners Court requested to receive and file the Tarrant County financial statements for the 5 months ended February 28, 2013.
Move approval to receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file February financial statements. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And if I could, I'd like to just inform the court of a process that we're getting ready to start. We've been working now for probably close to a year to implement the ability to send direct deposit or ACH payments to vendors. So we're going to roll that out to a very small pilot group of vendors, and eventually we'll only make that available to vendors that we're comfortable in using that with. But basically that means we'll be able to pay people without putting a check in an envelope and a stamp on it and sending it off, and so that we would be able to remit to our vendors that sign up for it and are interested, that we would direct deposit their accounts payable vendor payments to their bank account. And we're going to roll that out on a very small group here in the next few days. So we have a lot of attorneys and a lot of vendors that would be very interested in not having to wait on the mail.
I do have one question. Just for point of information, the fund balance, is that representing a typical reality of where we are regularly throughout the year, or is it because some of the expenses have not been incurred yet? Because we show a fund balance of...
What page would you be on, sir? Are you in the front or the back? You're in the front of the
I'm
book.
on the front.
Right, okay.
Second
Sure.
page.
Page 7?
Page 2.
It show a fund balance of $462,500.
Well, when you see the CAFR, the annual financial statements, that's required to be distributed into its various pieces and also then broken down into restricted and unrestricted or your old terms. We have new terms for it now, assigned, unassigned, and et cetera. So when you see that number over there that's the 462, that's everything, and it's restricted and unrestricted. It would include even monies that we are going to spend but have not spent. They're restricted for various purposes and whatnot. But that would be, that number's not significantly different from month to month, no.
It's not? It's
No.
Okay, that's what
It's just you're not used to looking at it that way if you've only been looking at the annual report, maybe more so than the monthly.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because we have to do more disclosure and more compartmentalize or putting it into buckets in the annual report.
I'll talk to you more, but
Okay.
I look at the collection rate on the revenue. We, up to date, we collected about 82, 83% already, but on the expenses, we only incurred about 30-some% of the budgeted amount. So
And-
there is a
and-
big variation.
Right, and that will always be the case, because obviously, property taxes are delinquent after January 31st. So the bulk of our revenues, and of course, we continue to collect delinquent and other taxes throughout the year, but we collect the bulk of our revenues up front like that, if nothing else, on property taxes. But salaries, your biggest expense, are paid pro rata over a
So
12-month
that's because
period.
the nature of cash flow, in and out.
Yes.
I see, okay.
But I'd be happy to have any further discussions that you'd like.
Thank you.
Vote on that. Motion passes unanimously.
I move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file personnel agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Good morning. Did everybody have a nice long weekend?
Good morning, Ms.
Good morning.
Campbell. Yes, ma'am, we did.
Mr. Wetzel.
Good morning, Judge
Good morning.
Whitley, Commissioners.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to present this item for your consideration. We're requesting today approval of two agreements, an agency access agreement between Tarrant County, the City of Hearst, and SunGuard Public Sector to allow access to and limited right use of OSSI SunGuard software used by the Tarrant County Sheriff's Department. Additionally, we're asking approval for an interlocal agreement between Tarrant County and the City of Hearst to participate in an OSSI SunGuard software shared services pilot program.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jack? Nope. Come on down. What'd you do? Run Beecham off?
We did run him off. He's down in Austin.
Probably hiding in the Burgundy.
No.
Have you heard of the Burgundy Room?
No.
Any of y'all heard of the Burgundy Room?
No, sir.
It has nothing to do with wine either, Judge. It's the color of the furniture that's in there.
We had a number of people come up to the 5th floor this morning seeking directions to the Burgundy Room.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know whether that was like a restaurant room or what.
You might want to
Did you find out?
room is.
Well, it's a conference room, Your Honor, and we have a wood room which has wood furniture, and a burgundy room that has burgundy furniture.
Burgundy Room.
It's going to be a long day.
Yes, sir.
So Jack's in the Burgundy room?
No, sir. He's in Austin,
No.
and I don't know if they have a burgundy room down there or
I
not.
doubt it. My guess is they may have a burnt orange room, but they don't have a Burgundy room.
That's true.
I mean,
That's true.
guaranteed that.
Point's well taken. Thank you. Okay.
Go right ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We have one item for your consideration this morning. That's bid number 2013-052. This is the purchase of Cisco wireless network equipment for the Information Technologies Department. We're recommending the low bid award to INX LLC in the amount of $62,811.57. I would also like to add that we had one bidder that marked their bid confidential that we rejected, and so we're recommending award to to this particular bidder. Had they been had they been accepted, they would have been number 5 of 7 of the bids that we had received.
What does a bid marked confidential mean?
They have marked their pricing as proprietary and confidential. Bids are open publicly and posted on our website, and if it's marked confidential, we are not able to share that information with the public.
Move approval.
Second, with one question.
Yes, sir.
Are these equipment to replace the existing wireless network, or is it to expand it?
If I could defer.
Judge Whitley, Commissioner Wynn, this is to upgrade to the current standard, and we are also focusing on a plan to develop a current state understanding of our wireless capabilities, and then also define, together with the IT Steering Committee, a future state. So right now, we're just replacing legacy access points to the latest generation.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, questions? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fickus, I believe you have an interlocal agreement.
An interlocal agreement with the city of Keller. I'd like to move approval. This is on Mount Gilead Road.
Second.
Okay, now, you said with the city of Keller, are you going to include the CD, E, and F, the city of Bedford? Or are you just doing A and B right now?
We can certainly do them all at one time. We can also add the city of Bedford for work on Murphy Drive. And also the city of Bedford to purchase liquid asphalt. So we can do all 6 items.
My second will cover all 6.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Any appointments?
Yes, sir. I would like to appoint Mrs. Martha Jo McAfee of Arlington and Mr. Ron Austin. Ms. McAfee onto the CPS board, and Mr. Ron Austin, also of Arlington, onto the Historical Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. McAfee has undergone and
Yes, sir.
gone through the backgrounds.
Dr. Mack.
Doctor.
Doctor. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have 3 items to bring to you this morning. Excuse me. The first is a briefing on the tax abatement request. Ms. McMillan is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Horizon Milling is a flour milling plant in Saginaw. It's a division of Cargill, and they are currently planning expansion and modernization of their flour mill facility. The Saginaw plant is one of the largest within Horizon Milling, but it's also one of the oldest, dating back to, I think, sometime in the 1930s, and I believe Horizon actually took it over sometime in the 70s. I'll let them talk about some more, but the plant requires upgrades and renovation in order to be competitive within the Horizon structure, competitive corporate structure. Plans call for the replacement of 2 existing wheat milling units and the construction of a new 7-story, 52,000 square foot mill tower. This will increase capacity and efficiency at the mill operations. And they will also provide for expansion of the flour storage space next to the existing mill storage building. The total improvement costs are estimated at just over $38 million. $12 million of these will be in real property improvements and $26 million in personal property improvements. There are currently 84 full-time employees at the plant and an average payroll of approximately $4.5 million a year. With this expansion, these employees will be retained, and they estimate a minimum of 5 new jobs will be added to the plant. The City of Saginaw has approved a 5-year tax abatement of 100% for the expansion of this facility. Staff is proposing county participation in tax abatement at a maximum of 40% for the 5-year period. We're also recommending hospital district participation at the same rate. The term sheet you have in your packet provides for a base abatement of 30%, with retention of current employment and the improvements, as we noted, the $38 million, $12 million in real property, and $26 million in personal property. And then the 10% would be additional abatement that could be gained by the added employment and by use of DVE and Tarrant County contractors, additional in construction contracting, and also the greater hiring of Tarrant County resident employment at the facility. Based on the current tax rates, should Horizon Milling earn the full 40% tax abatement for the 5-year period, we're estimating that the 5-year tax abatement would be worth approximately $200,000 from the county and just over $173,000 from the hospital district. At the same time, new tax revenues with these new improvements would be over $300,000 for the county and approximately $260,000 for the hospital district. Horizon does provide health care and 401k and a variety of other benefits to its full-time employees at a reasonable cost, as noted in their application. I'd like to have Dean Jacobs now, Cargill's property tax manager, and also John Kozad is here, who is the Saginaw facility manager, and Doug Barton, who is a project manager, to speak a little bit more about the project.
Just one question before they come up. What did you say was the term of the agreement?
5 years.
5 years.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Coming from Minnesota, I'm very honored to be here and had a nice reprieve from our 20-degree weather and 8 inches of snow.
So you're the one that brought this cold weather with you.
Right in behind me. Sorry about that.
You can go ice fishing afterward.
Yes, we're still snowmobiling and ice fishing in Minnesota, believe it or not. A year ago it was 80 degrees and we were golfing. Right now this year we're still snowmobiling. So it's good to be down here. I like Texas. As Ms. McMillan did such a wonderful job in summarizing our project, Cargill was faced with a dilemma. We needed to address an issue with one of our biggest, but one of our most outdated plants in an industry and in a region that is becoming increasingly more competitive. And with the help of some of the local incentives and the great workforce that we have and the support that we have in this community, we have made a commitment to invest in our Saginaw plant. That construction has started, as maybe some of you have driven by and seen, and so that project is well on its way. And it is a significant project that should place this position or place this property in position to be competitive for many years to come. Of course, from the operational side, Cargill is pleased to be a community member of this community, and I will, if there's any other questions of me, but otherwise I'd like to turn it over to John, and he can explain a little bit more about the plant itself. John?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Our facility began in the 1930s with the Burris family. Then in the 1972, Cargill purchased the facility, and we've been operating it ever since. It is one of our older facilities. Even today, we're milling wheat with equipment from the 1930s. And as mentioned, we need to upgrade our equipment to more food-safe equipment, safer operating equipment, and more efficient to maintain a competitive place in this low-margin business. The majority of us, over 80% of us, live in Tarrant County. We're members of the community of Saginaw and other cities here in Tarrant County. We do more than make flour. We do make 2 million pounds of flour a day, 7 days a week. But we also participate in community activities. We have a community service team where we donate typically over $40,000 a year to places like the Tarrant County Food Bank, the Saginaw Food Bank. We do educational seminars in the Saginaw School District with water conservation and so forth. We're very proud that our company is investing this money into the facility. We're excited about it, and we appreciate the opportunity that you guys are giving us to present this abatement. Thank you.
Thank you for investing in the community and encouraging your folks to do that, because that's what really makes our community the great place it is to live, is because of companies that encourage their employees to be a part and to take part in that. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
And they have been great, great partners in the Saginaw area.
As I mentioned, the city of Saginaw has already approved the tax abatement, and so we should be moving forward quickly to bring a abatement agreement to you, since that's already been done. So if there aren't any more questions, then staff will come back in a couple of weeks with a tax abatement agreement for this project. Thank you.
So we don't need to take action today?
No, not today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members of the court, if we could go to item B. This is an update or an annual report, actually, on the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Ms. Tarter.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor, members of the court. I appreciate your time. I've placed a couple of items at each of your seats. One is a brief report from our 2012 program year. I do have a more in-depth version. I would be glad to provide copies if you'll just let me know if you would like that, but this contains most of the highlights. Also, I've placed a 40-gallon challenge pledge sheet, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. We had a good year in 2012. I'm just amazed at the continued dedication of our staff and what they are out in the communities doing each day. I can't talk about everything that I've included today, so I'll just touch on a couple of topics. We have about 415 master gardeners who are working in over 20 projects across Tarrant County. Some of those include gardens at Union Gospel Mission, the Samaritan House. There are several schools where they manage outdoor learning environments for the children. Overall, last year they provided about 64,000 hours of volunteer service to the citizens of Tarrant County. They also developed, they have a speakers bureau, and in 2012 they added a children's speakers bureau to that so that they can increase their efforts out in the community and working with the children and encouraging them to learn the skill basically of gardening, to get out. There are a lot of things that go along with gardening, science, math, and so all of these things combined help children in those outdoor learning environments. In protecting our environment, of course, drought is on the mind of everyone. Water conservation efforts, we continue to see information about how we need to conserve our efforts. In 2012, throughout Tarrant County in programming, over 400 rain barrels were constructed and taken home with individuals so that they could begin collecting rainwater in their landscape. In addition to that, a 2-day workshop was held on rainwater harvesting for those individuals who work in the commercial horticulture industry. We also promote the 40-gallon challenge, which you all have that pledge sheet there. This is a nationwide effort. You can drill down at that website to Texas and, in fact, Tarrant County, and we are encouraging individuals to take the pledge and look at ways that they can save water in their own home, in their landscape. Let me give you an example. Anybody here know how many gallons of water you can save by turning off the water when you brush your teeth each morning?
No idea.
About 8 gallons. 8 gallons each time you brush your teeth, and that's for each individual in your household. So that's a simple step that people can take. I heard on the news this morning that this is Fix a Leak Week, and there are some things in our household that if they are leaking, they can waste up to 30 gallons of water a day. So very important for us as citizens to consider preserving this natural resource. And we're doing all that we can in promoting this effort throughout Tarrant County. Strengthening our families, of course, in our economic times, financial literacy is still a very timely topic. I wanted to highlight today our continued involvement with the Domestic Relations Office in providing educational programs to parents who are in arrears in their child support. This is a one-time class conducted on developing a spending plan or developing a budget. Last year, over 50% of the participants indicated that they did not have a spending plan or a budget. This may be one of the reasons that they were behind in their child support payments. At the conclusion of the class, evaluations indicated that 93% of them said that they would go ahead and develop that spending plan. We have gone on in 2013, and with our classes, we'll include an evaluation follow-up piece where those individuals that take that class can be contacted, and we'll see if they are actually putting those plans into action. So hopefully we'll have a good report for you this time next year. In relation to improving our health, we continue to address the issue of obesity, both with adults and with children. Our expanded food and nutrition education program enrolled over 688 families last year. That's basically at least one adult parent from each family. They had 432 that completed the series, which consists of 7 lessons that focus on the basics of nutrition, on food resource management, as well as food safety. In addition to that, there were 10,000 youth who were enrolled in nutrition education programs through the school and community outreach during the summer. And all of the evaluations from that, they do extensive evaluations with this program, and they find that they are making positive improvements in their food choices as well as their food safety practices, and also they're learning how to better manage the food dollars that they have available to them. Of course, kids are a focus in our 4-H and youth development program. We have over 600 children who are involved in our community 4-H club with over 25 clubs across the county. We have 113 adult volunteers that manage that program. In addition to that, we had 5,000 children who were involved in after-school school and summer education programs. Topics of those included water quality and conservation, robotics, photography. We also have an effort in relation to take a stand against bullying, and those programs focus on self-esteem, mediation with your peers, conflict resolution, and those type of things. All together with our expanded food and nutrition education program and our after-school programs with other programs with children, we have about 15,000 youth that are reached with those programs each year. In the area of agriculture, I think all of you are familiar with our Pizza Ranch program. That continues to be a success, but I wanted to highlight today a new target audience that was involved in programming last year in 2012, and this was our small acreage landowners. The programs were designed to address needs such as limited knowledge base and the desire to enjoy an ag lifestyle on a small acreage. Topics of seminars were management of cattle and management of sheep and goat production. We'll continue those programs this year with continued emphasis on the small landowner and making that a successful business if they desire to do so. This is just a snapshot of our 2012 educational outreach. As you can see, 2,000 programs were conducted last year. This includes all of the staff in our office. In addition, our total volunteer hours were over 75,000. So that's Master Wellness volunteers in addition to the other volunteers who serve in our other program areas. We had 188 volunteers that were leading programs out in the community in addition to their other community service during 2012. I would be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And as always, we appreciate your continued support.
Thank you.
I did some research into your 4-H club.
Yes.
And my office is going to contact your office to see what we can do to work together to bring some of that activities to East Arlington as we are moving forward with a certain plan to help out that area.
Yes,
but
very
the
good.
4-H club is very, very, very good.
Okay, thank you. We'll look forward to it.
Thank you.
Members of the Court, on item C, this is the legislative update, week 11. Mr. Mendez has provided in your backup material his memo. Just one thing to note, a good thing to note, is that We're over halfway through now with the legislative session. So I'll try to answer any questions that you may have.
They had their first hearing in the Senate on revenue caps yesterday, so we need to be aware of that and continue. We had a lot of good folks down there providing testimony as to, you know, letting us maintain local control.
Who's pushing the caps?
The two bills that were filed in the Senate were one, Senator Patrick and Senator Williams, both from Harris County.
Mm-hmm.
From that standpoint. Anything else at this time? We'll recess our open meeting to proceed to close to discuss items exempted under Section. Return from our closed session, we'll now address the following matters.
Oh, Mr. Wright.
Thank you. We have some condemnations for the court to authorize us to use the power of eminent domain. They're items A1, that's closed. On open under DA's office, they're item E1 and E2, requesting approval of the resolution jointly if possible.
I move that the Tarrant County Commissioners Court authorize the use of the power of eminent domain to acquire the following 2 tracts of land and 2 temporary easements for use in a public project known as the laying out and reconstruction of U.S. Highway 377 from Winscott Lakeway to Interstate Highway 20 in Benbrook, Texas, and authorize the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office to initiate condemnation proceedings to acquire these 2 tracts of land and 2 temporary easements. The first being a fee simple interest in a 0.0008 acre, which is 35 square feet of land, more or less, and a temporary easement in the amount of 0.0024 acres, 104 square feet of land, more or less, both tracts of land being situated in the J.M. Evans Survey, abstract number 466, in the city of Benbrook, Tarrant County, Texas. And tract number 2, a fee simple interest in a 0.0653 acre or 2,843 square feet of land, more or less, and a temporary easement in a 0.0216 acre, 939 square feet of land, more or less, both tracts of land being situated in the John Stevens Survey, abstract number 1494, being a part of Lot 2, Block 1 of 377 Square, addition to the city of Benbrook, as recorded in volume 388-161, page 31 of the plat records of Tarrant County, Texas.
More or less.
More or less.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Texas Legislature. Is there any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Members of the court, if we could now go into our agenda item on the work session. This is item 15A. This concerns the proposed public employee benefit cooperative health plan changes for the next calendar year. Ms. Glenn is here to address the court.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As Mr. Manius has mentioned over this last several weeks, today is I guess, the beginning of our formal look at what 2014 might look like in the way of health care changes for the county. Today specifically, we want to spend some time talking to the court about a vehicle called account-based health care plans. Donna Konjovic is here with the PEBC to make the presentation today. We are not going to be asking, of course, for any action today. This is just a briefing item. We do anticipate that we'll be back before the court probably numerous times. This is a fairly complex, complicated plan And so we want to make sure that the court has as much time as it needs to become familiar, maybe not comfortable, but familiar with this plan as we move forward. So obviously, staff is here and available if you all have questions, and I'll ask Ms. Kondovic to come forward.
Members of the court, as Diana comes forward, I think it's going to be important that Diana, you and everyone else talk about a timeline on this, because this action has not been formally approved by the PEBC yet. I think Diana has made the round to just about all of the different governing bodies that participate in PEBC, but PEBC's decision timeline is something that begins in April. So we'll need to go ahead and make sure that if you have an opinion, I shouldn't even say this, but if you have an opinion, please express that opinion. And
You're worried about that, GK?
As we're all calm and collected, we're going to move forward now, Diana.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Judge Whitley and Commissioners, thank you for allowing me to come here and talk with you today about one of the proposed health plan changes at the PBC. Let me just start by saying, as Tina mentioned, this is perhaps the first time you've been hearing from me directly about this, but I'm sure it won't be the last. Our PBC board wanted to be sure that we were out and talking with all of our participating groups. So you are one of 5, and the reason they wanted us to talk with each group is, as they consider action, we certainly wanted feedback so that we could make sure that we were talking about the things that everybody needs to know. First of all, the disclaimer here is that this particular presentation is prepared specifically for the PEBC member groups. It may not be appropriate for any other venue or any other group. In fact, some of the information, is brief. This is a high-level overview. And by design, we're not giving complete discussions of health care reform at this session, although it's very difficult not to talk a little bit about health care reform when we talk about a change in plans, because it's happening at the same time. So let me just set the stage for you a little bit. The PEBC is considering implementing an account-based health plan effective January 1, 2014. It's not the first time we've talked about an account-based health plan, but it's the first time that we have actually had a project in place to really study and analyze how such a plan would work within the PBC. So we began with an exploratory meeting in early 2012 to talk and understand about market conditions, healthcare reform, plan options, costs, and that's actually what led to a PBC level project to examine an account-based health plan. In late 2012, we formed a PBC committee made up of members from each of our groups, many of whom are in this room today. And that committee has met on several occasions already, all-day meetings, as we've had various experts and Towers Watson join us and talk about the various things that would impact such a plan. The goal is for us to be able to provide a recommendation to the PBC board for our April 2013 board meeting, which is at the end of April. And again, the committee is the group that is formulating the recommendation. So here are a few things we know for sure. As we talk about the strategies going forward, we know how important it is to have a long-term view. And that's not that easy anymore, because we're so faced with so many short-term strategies, like things that happen in healthcare reform under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. As I mentioned, it's happening concurrently. We also know the options with the greatest potential for managing costs over time aren't going to show immediate savings. You're not going to see a savings in the first year. We also know that lasting change depends on each employee taking an increased role in managing their own health outcomes and changing unhealthy behavior. So increasing employee responsibility, and promoting employee behavior change takes time. And you'll hear a little bit today about the timing of all of this and why this is not too early, and it's actually excellent timing to be talking about an account-based health plan. So here's the what. The proposed health plan change we're talking about is to replace the existing EPO plan with an account-based health plan.
You
And
might hit the forward button.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. And I should also let you know that this is not final at this point, but we've driven down to this strategy based on a variety of items, and some we'll come back to and talk with you about during this presentation. So what we would end up with is a PPO plan like we have today, and a PPO plan, which is called a high deductible health plan with an HSA. Currently, our EPO plan design is considered a rich plan design, meaning that the plan itself pays for most other claims with very little upfront money from an employee. And when I talk about the plan, I'm talking about the plan sponsor, Tarrant County. I'm not talking about an insurance company elsewhere. I'm talking about Tarrant County funds that are paying for the benefits in both the EPO and PPO plan. So when I talk about the PPO plan for 2014, except for the requirements of health care reform, we don't expect that to change. And I'm going to preface this comment a little bit by saying even recent guidance in the last couple of weeks caused us to perhaps make a few changes for our committee to consider next week when they meet. It won't overall cause any dramatic change in costs for the employer, but it could definitely benefit the employee, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. The high deductible health plan is defined based on Internal Revenue Service parameters. The health savings account is the account-based portion of an account-based plan. And so a high deductible health plan defined by IRS parameters, folks who are enrolled in that plan can also have an HSA or a health care savings account. You do have to be enrolled in a high deductible health plan. Remember, that's a PPO with a higher deductible. You have to be enrolled in a plan like that in order to be eligible to save funds in a health savings account. Both an employer and an employee can contribute to the HSA. There are certain rules that apply, and we'll talk about those shortly. But one thing that is really valuable with an HSA account is it's tax protected and it builds over time. If you think of a current FSA, or what we call a healthcare flexible spending account, the FSA account has a use it or lose it provision. That means that if you don't spend the money in the current plan year on eligible health care expenses, that money goes away. Where does it go? It goes to the employer. Under an HSA, if you don't spend the money, you can continue to save it year over year over year. It does not go away. It builds over time. So here's the translation. In 2014, medical plan choices would be the PPO plan with an FSA, just like we have today. I think sometimes some folks may refer to it as a Section 125 plan, the FSA portion of that. And an HDHP plan, which again is a PPO plan with the higher deductible, and that plan would have an HSA account. Both would use the same broad United Healthcare networks, just like we do today. When you think
But you'd have either one or the other, not both. Is that correct?
you would have the same health plan, the same network.
You'd either have the FSA or the health savings account.
That is
but not
correct.
both.
Yes, Commissioner, that is correct. The high deductible health plan with an HSA account, I think sometimes one of the best ways to think about it is, if you remember from years ago, you sometimes think of traditional indemnity insurance. Often it was an 80-20 plan with a deductible, and after you paid the deductible, you paid 20% and the plan paid 80%. That was kind of the old way to cover health costs. This is kind of similar in a way, except the way that we have designed the high deductible health plan would be a 90-10 coinsurance, where the plan would pay 90% and the employee 10%, but there would be a larger deductible. And I will explain why it's designed that way shortly, and it will all fall into place for you. The reason high deductible health plans with HSAs have become so popular is because they promote member behavior change. Folks would be considering how much things cost before they incur an expense, more perhaps than they do today. Today, everything in our plans is primarily copay driven. So if an employee thinks of how much does it cost to go to the doctor, they might think it costs $25. And that's a true statement to an employee. That's how much out of pocket they pay. In a high deductible health plan with an HSA, if the deductible is not yet met, the employee might pay $85 for that same service. And you'll see how those dollars build until the deductibles are met and the coinsurance kicks in. The HSA account provides a cushion of funds to an employee in order to pay their deductible and coinsurance until the plan reaches 100% status. So the goal is not to hurry up and spend it to get to 100%. The goal is to try to save those dollars if you can. If you can't, you'll have the cushion. If you can, if you have available funds to pay the $85 fee, you might want to save that money in your HSA because it will continue to roll over and grow as the years go on. This approach, we know, promotes a save versus a spend approach. This is the time of year we're telling people, make sure now that you file your flexible spending account claims by April 15th. And they had to be incurred by a certain date. And if you didn't incur those funds, you're going to lose those funds. Well, that issue goes away with a health spending or a health savings account. An HSA account, you don't have to worry about going out and trying to spend, incur cost. Even though the employee's goal is to get their pre-tax dollars back, there's still cost incurred that the county is paying. And so with the HSA account, folks are strongly encouraged to contribute, similar to the way they do today with their flexible spending account. The HSA account does not replace a flexible spending account in terms of an employee doesn't have to contribute anymore. An employee can certainly choose how much they wish to contribute, but we strongly encourage people to use that approach to make sure that there are funds constantly going into that account that can build over time. An HSA account can also be structured to favor lower income earners. And perhaps that might allow for some equalization of the potential tax benefits when compared to higher income earners. Now, we know that it won't be 100% equal, but you can structure it in such a way that you can actually cause those who are lower income earners to have perhaps a little bit more money in their health savings account than somebody who is a high income earner. And that's by providing, at least in this first year, some employer seed money. And I'll explain how that works here in a minute, but basically is to provide some upfront funds to anyone who enrolls in this account so that they have some dollars available to pay for some of those healthcare costs that perhaps they didn't expect in the first few months. The first few months leading up to the first year of this plan is the one that we really want to make sure folks can save as much as they can, because it's the fact that it can build over time that is really going to help them. But knowing things can happen, employer seed money makes sure that employees have the ability to have some funds to meet their goals.
Diana?
Yes, sir.
If you would explain on the FSAs or the monies of the 125 plan versus the health savings account, I'll explain it. On the 125 plan, at the beginning of every year, let's say a person puts in the maximum, which is $2,500. That's what we anticipate that they're going to put in, or they say they're going to put in over the calendar year. So once January 1st hits, that account is automatically loaded by the county, or loaded to $2,500. So you may not have put all $2,500 into that 125 account, but if you have expenditures up to that amount, you can pull it out. With the HSA, it doesn't work that way. You can only spend what monies you actually have put into the account at that time.
Right, right, and that's an excellent point. The FSA account, as you mentioned, is it's actually perhaps a better way to look at it is an employee could use 100% of that account even on the first day of the plan year if they wanted to. They could actually leave the county 1 month later and not have to pay it back. With the HSA account, the funds are only available to the extent that the employee has had those contributions deducted from their payroll check. Similar to how today a dependent care reimbursement account works, where for people who have daycare, they can actually make an election and contribute through their payroll check the amount of money to pay their daycare expenses, but they can only pull it out to the extent they've deposited those monies through their payroll check.
And again,
It's
that's
similar
because
to
that account belongs to them as opposed to being an account that we both share risk in.
You both share risk in the dependent care account. The health savings account belongs strictly to the employee. The county would have to fund, if the county wants to put seed money into one of those accounts, you actually have to move the money. With a flexible spending account, you don't move any money. You pay claims as they are incurred or, request reimbursement up to the maximum election. So it's a notional type account. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In the last item, you're talking about providing tier upfront fund,
Seed money.
Seed money.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. The contribution that the county makes, the seed money will be the same for everybody.
Well,
But
that's
we may choose to front a larger amount for employees with lower salaries, right?
Actually-
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's partially true. You would load it up front, but what I'm talking about is perhaps somebody who's in maybe a 20% tax bracket, technically people at the lower end of the earning spectrum, may have a larger dollar amount of seed money compared to those who are in the higher tax brackets. Not that that has to be done, but it would help make sure that there's value there to those who are on the lower side of the earning spectrum. We're going to come back to that too, Commissioner, and explain that a little bit further. That's something that we'll be talking more about at the committee level, how operationally that can work. Groups do not have to do it. You can say every employee is going to get the same amount if they enroll in this plan. We don't really care what your salary is. Or you can say, because we recognize those who earn less may not have as much value if it's the same amount, we may increase that one amount, or that one a bit, and decrease the higher earning salary contribution a bit. It just depends on each group, and we would definitely show you examples of how that could work if you choose to consider that. Okay.
Thank you.
Now we're going to talk about, this is just a brief snapshot, but it kind of gives you just the high-level pieces of what would look different. And I'm on slide 5 if you're looking at a hard copy. The thing we know for sure is that success of a plan like this hinges on several things. And one of the things that we want to be sure of is that people understand this is not a case of cost shifting or anything like that. This is a situation where we have actually asked Towers-Watson and their actuarial group to examine our plans and give us what they believe the value of that plan is. This is before anybody incurs any cost. they have models and tools that can assess, based on our plan designs, what these plans look like. So, for example, I'm looking at the top bullets here. We're looking at something that's actuarially equivalent, even though they operate differently. And because the new high deductible health plan with an HSA is actuarially pretty close to being equivalent with the current EPO, we would not be making, significant cost recommendations on this because it's still pretty close. You can see there that the actuarial value estimates for our EPO plan today are 0.88 to 0.90, which means the plan pays roughly 88 cents to 90 cents out of every dollar. The PPO plan today is currently 78 cents to 80 cents paid by the employee for every dollar. The high deductible health plan with HSA, as you see it designed here, is roughly 87 cents to 89 cents for every dollar. So the takeaway is that in terms of value, even though the EPO plan would be replaced with a high deductible health plan and an HSA, the plan design is presented in such a way that it's pretty similar in cost. So let's just kind of talk about a few things here that you can see, and then I'll come back. I'm sure you'll have some questions. First of all, in our current PPO plan, and I'm going to talk about a single only because it's easier to follow. On that first row, you can see on in-network, the annual deductible is $500 in our current PPO plan. In the high deductible plan with an HSA, we are proposing a $1,500 deductible. Now, I'm going to stop right here and say this. One of the things that I've done with each group is to answer this question, and I'll come back to it as many times as I need to. But if I were looking at this plan, my first question would be, okay, so if I needed it, where am I going to get that $500? That's a question everybody should be asking today that's enrolled in that plan. But especially with the high deductible plan, where am I going to get that $1,500? And so we'll come back to that because it'll be pretty clear to you. The coinsurance level means that once you pay your deductible, you will then pay, the county pays 80% of in-network PPO costs, and the employee pays 20%. Now, when I say 80 and 20%, that's based on those contracted rates that we have with UnitedHealthcare. That's not what the bill is. That's the contracted rate, which is typically lower. On the high deductible plan, following over to the right, the employee, after they meet that deductible, would pay 10%, and the employer would pay 90%, again, of the allowable cost. And then we get to the piece of the out-of-pocket maximum, which means at what point does this plan become a 100% plan when the county is paying all the cost? Well, in today's world for PPO single, once you pay $3,500 out of pocket, the plan becomes a 100% plan. In today's world, it's not very often that that occurs because so much of the cost is copay driven. So many employees pay only copays. There are very few things that actually apply to coinsurance, and one of them is on this chart we'll go over in a minute. In the high deductible health plan with the HSA, we're saying that the out-of-pocket maximum would be $2,500 for a single. So after that $1,500 deductible, the plan would pay 90% and the employee 10% until the employee reaches $2,500, at which point the plan would pay 100%.
So at that point in time, the employee would have $4,000 into the deal because the deductible is not included in that out-of-pocket maximum.
That is correct. Now, yes, sir.
I'm getting there.
I need to come back to Judge Whitley's question first.
Go to him.
The deductible does count toward hitting on the high deductible health plan.
Okay, so then it's not 10% up until $2,500, it's 10% up to $1,000.
To the $1,500 deductible. After the $1,500 deductible,
That
then
means I have $1,000 left on my out-of-pocket.
Correct.
So then on the next $10,000, I will pay 10% all the way up to the next $10,000 in cost.
Right.
So I'll be out a total of $2,500 on a single individual.
Right, that is correct. Now, and again, I'm saving the best for last, so bear with me a little bit. Commissioner, you had a question.
My question is, if this high deductible plan with the HSA is actuarially equivalent in value to the EPO, why do it?
Well, that's a really good question. The point is not to necessarily look at what can we replace this plan with that's the same, because it's really truly not going to drive less costs in the beginning. The issue here is that we want to make sure as we convert to a plan like this, and there are plenty of reasons that we need to be looking at this connected with healthcare reform, connected with employee behavior, connected with how we can make sure that we emphasize more tax potential for people, that have nothing to do with whether or not we should change a plan. The key is that the reason we valued it as close as we could is so that employees would know this is not we're taking away the EPO, which is 88 to 90 cents, and replacing it with something that's 40 cents. We have those numbers of the coinsurance, the out-of-pocket maximum, have been adjusted to yield a value similar to the EPO so that employees would not feel like it's going away in value. It's pretty much the same value. It's how you use that plan that's going to make the difference.
Didn't you say that this high deductible plan with HSA did not represent a cost shift from employer to employee?
Correct, I did.
How can that be when the employee is expected to come up with this high deductible?
You know, Commissioner, can I come back to that
Sure.
question? And I absolutely will, because I think there are a number of things that are components of that answer that we're going to see here in a moment. But that's actually a great example of why we made sure that the value is so close to the EPO. It may feel like a cost shift, but when we get finished with this, I think you'll see it's not so much a cost shift as much as it is how can I control, or how can I as an employee perhaps better use my health care dollars and save for the future and have perhaps benefits. And for some people it may be better than what they have today. Others maybe not. Some people this will be perfect for, others no. And so we clearly recognize there are folks that this plan is not appropriate for, and there are folks who, given a chance, they may find it,
But if we're
terrific.
going to take away the EPO, then what other choice is the employee going to have?
The PPO plan, or the high deductible plan, our current PPO plan. So let's just finish the PPO, and then I'll talk a little bit about what those employee choices look like. So we went through the out-of-pocket maximum. Today, in physician office visits, the plan pays 100% after the copay. The copay depends on if you see a PCP or pediatrician, internal medicine, or a specialist. The high deductible plan, after the deductible, the plan would pay 90%. So if an employee faced with an $85 charge at the doctor had already met their deductible, the 10% portion would be $8.50. But again, they would have to pay the cost, through their deductible. The preventive care portion of both plans remains the same, 100% paid for by the plan. Those expenses did not change. They were expanded for 2013, more women's health services, young mom services that are preventive in nature, And regardless of which plan you're in, preventive care is still covered at 100%. In the hospital surgery section, our current PPOs, the employee pays 20% after deductible, and the high deductible health plan would be 90%, so meaning the employee would pay 10%. Now, let me stop right there for a moment and tell you something that is not on this slide that has been a recent change and recent updated guidance. And that is beginning in 2014 on the PPO plan that we currently have that we're talking about keeping in 2014, co-pays will count toward out-of-pocket. That has been clarified under Health and Human Services and the IRS based on recent guidance. What does that mean? Well, that means the value of that PPO plan up there, where it shows 78 cents to 80 cents, Towers-Watson right now is estimating, we don't have the final modeling done yet, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of this because we'll be talking about it at our next committee meeting. That means it would likely go up 4 percentage points. So now we're talking about 82 to 84 cents instead of 78 to 80. So while we will still have the same co-pays, those co-pays will count toward out-of-pocket expense. And that will definitely be more cost for the employer. But in both plans then, whatever you pay at the doctor's office is going to count toward that out-of-pocket. That may actually make this a little bit more palatable for many employees, but there could be some minor changes based on where those actuarial values lie. We don't know that for sure until our next meeting. But I wanted to at least give you our early findings on that. And that means not just doctor office copays. That means all copays. So prescription drugs that you see there, where currently you see our copay structure, the lesser of $15 or cost for a generic at the retail pharmacy, $25 for brand, $50 for non-preferred brand. Those copays will count toward meeting the out-of-pocket maximum. On the high deductible health plan, the HSA, the employee would pay their full cost up to that $1,500, and then they'll pay 10% for a prescription drug, a brand drug, and it would not exceed 10%. So, and there you see the employer seed money there on the high deductible plan, 500 single, 1,000 family. That was the amount modeled to make sure we could keep this within range of the EPO plan. Some groups may tweak that a little bit, but we still have to make sure whatever that number is that we run it through the models to make sure we're not throwing off the actuarial value of the plans, which will become very important here shortly. So, Commissioner, in part to come back to your question, I'm going to talk a little bit about, so where do we find the money to come up with the deductible, first of all, because then you're at 10% on the high deductible health plan. And truly, there could be cases, many, many cases, where that 10% would be less than a copay. So let's just talk for a moment about somebody on the PPO plan with a $500 deductible if they're enrolled on that plan. Well, in Tarrant County, you contribute to each employee the sum of roughly $240 a year to their flexible spending account, right? And they could use every bit of that toward that $500. And I don't remember the exact total that an employee can earn on your wellness program, but I know that they can earn somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 or so. Even if they did half of that, $150 might come from there. So there you have $240 plus $150 is $290 of the $500. Or I'm sorry, $390. Thank you. Keep me honest. And so once you get past that $390, you still have $110 that somebody needs to find. And so basically there are several choices that are available to most of us. One, either look at our own resources. Two, perhaps when we go through annual enrollment, we make an election from the flexible spending account so that if I needed those dollars at the beginning of the year, I could have them. I could make a $500 election, and on January 1, I could use every bit of that if I needed it. But if I don't need it, I can wait, throughout the year as I need it to incur it, and you pretty much cover your deductible. On the high deductible health plan, it's kind of similar. You're talking about a $1,500 deductible for a single person. So first of all, we're talking there $500 from the HSA employer seed money, and at least in the first year, perhaps that's funded all up front. It doesn't have to be, but perhaps it is, so that an employee could have access to those dollars. And you probably still have access to some other rewards, wellness rewards, whatever. And there's a way to have a limited purpose flexible spending account that I'm going to talk about later that would be only for those enrolled in the high deductible health plan. So it's a modified flex account. So you'd have a place to put employer dollars in case they need them. So there you have $500, you have the $1,500 deductible, so let's say you need to come up with $1,000. So that $1,000, let's just assume for a moment that somebody elects that in their flex account. That means that $1,000 is available to them on January 1, and they pay it back, 1/26 of that amount in each payroll check. The key is it's pre-tax. And so the dollars that are in that flex account, in that HSA account, are pre-tax. So I'm not even going to talk about what the tax savings would be to somebody, depending on what tax bracket they're in, but you almost have to keep that in the back of your mind. So the source of the deductible funds, obviously, in this day and age, we all know healthcare is expensive. We all do our best to save for when we need those dollars, and we may not be able to in some cases. So these flex accounts, the HSA account, the tax savings, the employer, there's FICA savings on those dollars to both the employer and the employee. We suspect, strongly suspect, the premium for such a plan would be dramatically less than your lowest cost plan. So the employee wouldn't be paying as much in premium each month. So if you look at it from that perspective, and I'm just using a round number, if an employee paid $90 a month today for coverage, you might say that this plan would cost $45. A month. So $45 a month available right there, times 12. You can do the math on that. The seed money, the wellness rewards, there are ways to have available funds. The question is, will they all be available on January 1? Well, the answer is no. The health savings account, only to the extent the employer's seed money is available. But I'd also tell you that you don't have all your employees incurring all their high claims on January 1. They're incurred throughout a plan year. So, it's a matter of making sure your employees have enough information and scenarios to manage why this might work for them and, frankly, why it may not.
Now, recognizing that they may not have the funds if they're at one point, but let's say, for example, that they haven't put the money in the HSA account, they incur an expense. Later on, they put the money in the HSA account. Can they reimburse themselves? They can, can't they?
Absolutely.
So even though it may not be in there at January 1st, they may incur an expense in January, and it may take them till June that they put enough money in the HSA account.
Correct.
But in June, they can still reimburse themselves for expenses that were in the current year.
Yes, Judge, that's correct.
But not prior to the time that we set up the HSA account.
Right. And so I'm going to move on just in the interest of time, but we can certainly come back to that so that folks can have an opportunity to ask questions. So first let's talk, we have to put sometimes our employer hat on, our employee hat on when we're talking about these plans. So we're going to talk about the employer plan employer hat first. Why do employers have such an interest in account-based health plans? Well, one thing for sure, the plan design does promote shared accountability, and employees become more conscious about the costs of the care they're receiving. The employees, as I mentioned, own the health savings account. The emphasis is changed from spend to save. And if an employee left 1 month later, 10 years later, if they retire, whatever's in that account is theirs. It goes with them. Both plans, as I mentioned, cover preventive care to 100% with no payment from the employee. Healthcare reform established that, and it was expanded for 2013. Interestingly enough, Towers Watson, I asked them to check not only theirs, and I checked some studies, they checked other plans. Studies, just in general, have shown that employees enrolled in an account-based health plan get preventive care at a higher rate than in traditional plans. And that's interesting because in both plans it doesn't cost the employee anything. But those who are in an account-based health plan tend to use preventive care services at a greater extent, to a greater extent than those who are not enrolled in an account-based health plan. They also tend to make better choices as consumers, a generic instead of a brand if they can, et cetera. Over time, we know this type of plan is shown to better control costs and change employee behavior with a range of maybe 5 to 7% lower costs over 2 years versus a traditional plan like our PPO, and up to about 2% lower medical trend over time. Part of that is utilization-based as well.
Yeah, and that's the part I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that the employee behavior change that we may get from this may be failure to go get their medical conditions treated because they don't have the deductible.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's certainly one of the components of the high deductible health plan that everybody is very in tune to. And that's why the seed money and things like that are intended to help people make sure they can get to the care that they need to get to. And frankly, some people may just say, I just don't want to deal with it. I like having that predictable co-payment each and every time, no matter what. And that's okay. We know you will have employees like that. And the PPO would be the place for them to enroll.
But if it encourages them to do if statistics are showing that it encourages them to do preventive care, that's what we've tried to focus our employees on. I'm not sure how successfully, but we continue to try to push them toward preventive care.
It's interesting. That concept in itself is absolutely the right thing for an employer to do. I mean, the winner on preventive care anymore, though, is found to be perhaps greater productivity, fewer absenteeism cases, things like that. From a cost perspective, employers pay for that preventive care. And yes, you want employees to take advantage of that. But you're right, Judge. I mean, that would definitely, over time, they tend to use preventive care at a greater, frequency. However, to your point, Commissioner Brooks, absolutely true. And for a person who is just concerned they don't want to do that, they need that predictability, then this would not be a plan for them. And we would show them a scenario as to why and why not. And by the way, I should have mentioned very early on, I've left communication about this plan to the very last slide. I don't want you to think that's because that's where it is on the value chain. It's the very basis of everything we're talking about is helping people understand. And so that's one of the components that we would certainly have to address. Make sure you understand. This is the best case, worst case. Here's all the scenarios in between that could affect you. And so you yourself have to decide how you're going to manage your plan. And it's just not as easy as it used to be. It's just not.
It's not as easy as it used to be, and it's not as simple as this presentation would have one believe, because the Towers-Watson study doesn't take into consideration the fact that Tarrant County's compensation is below market, and people stay with us because of the good benefits package. And that has been proven by other consultants who we pay a bunch of money to. My concern is that if you eliminate the good benefits package, then our employees will find themselves more inclined to seek positions elsewhere. And we will not only lose our investment in that particular employee, but we will suffer the cost of training replacement employees. So there are hidden and unintended costs.
You know, Commissioner, you've touched on so many just absolutely excellent points in connection with any benefits that you offer. It's a part of a total compensation package. And our goal is not to tell you how much this should be a part of yours, but we clearly recognize it's part of a much bigger pie. The problem is the pie doesn't get any bigger, but the benefits cost does, and so we're trying to provide ways, and you'll see in a moment why it's even becoming more of an urgent situation than you might think. To your first point, it looks so simple. I absolutely have to tell you, I'm going to take that as a compliment, because for those on the committee, they just only know the volumes and volumes and volumes of data and information, and we have purposely sifted this down to like a dozen slides. I could no more give you every various, change component in an hour than anybody, but these are not things that we're trying to gloss over or ignore. Just for the purpose of this presentation, we want you to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, you don't even have access
to your total compensation. That's correct. I don't.
Picture.
I don't. Okay. As we were just talking about, though, due to the pressures connected to benefits costs, the market in general has been moving in this direction. Employee decision-making tools have greatly improved to support it and to help educate employees about the various choices. I was explaining to someone just before this meeting started that I always look for ways that people can help, analyze or make an analogy that people can relate to. And this is not an apples-to-apples analogy, but it's almost like with your own personal income tax. I don't know too many people, except maybe on this quorum, I shouldn't say it this way, that know the tax code cover to cover. However, as individuals who all file tax returns, we have come to know the things or find the things that are important to us in making sure we either file our returns correctly, make good decisions as we can, find things that can help save us money, maybe better make our money grow or last longer. And even the tools to do that have so improved over recent years, even free tools with the IRS or TurboTax or, programs like that. And if we have questions because we're not sure what to do, we have resources we can go to try to get some more information. Now, certainly, the income tax IRS code is quite different, except that healthcare reform today, not so much so different with the volumes and volumes of information. And all of us are in the situation of having to try to understand how is this going to affect me. And I can only tell you that for employers, it's almost unbelievably difficult. Not only are you also employees, but you have sort of a paternalistic viewpoint of your employees, which is wonderful. So some of the information that we're sharing today is to help relieve some of the pressure on benefit costs in a a world that's changing and spinning even as I'm standing here right now. Even the copay counting toward out-of-pocket on a PPO plan, which happened here recently, we're watching day to day because these things are going to change, and likely it could change again before we're all finished with this. So I just want to be sure, this is not, PEBC wants to make a change because this is, we want all of the employer groups and their employees to understand this. Many may not like it, and frankly, they shouldn't probably take advantage of it then, but others may like it. We just want everybody to understand it as it relates to them and their own particular circumstances. I mentioned the prevalence of the growth of account-based health plans. It is kind of stabilizing over the years, but if you look down there at 2012, when maybe 2% of all plans overall were account-based plans, you can see how it's grown throughout the years. The middle line, that bold line, is just overall. The bottom line, where it starts at 26% in late 2010 up to 53%, is public sector and education. And actually, estimates are that's going to be a number greater than 53% by the time all of 2012 is looked at. The top line is the DFW area. So you can see how even in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the number of employers are embracing this. Some are doing what they call total takeover. It's the only choice you got. We aren't suggesting that. But it's certainly, when you can offer it against one more plan, you know that it's going to perhaps have some people take a great interest in it, and once that ball starts rolling and people see how it can work for them, you may have people that are just so grateful it's here, others who won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And frankly, folks can come in and out of these plans every year at annual enrollment. So if somebody enrolled, let's say, in the PPO plan for 2014, and then in talking heard somebody say, oh, that high deductible plan, whatever, and they said, well, I want in 2015, they can do that. They can even come back out in 2016 if they say, I didn't like it. And guess what? The money in that HSA account still belongs to them. So it's really a way that we're not forcing it on people. It's a choice-driven option. Kind of continuing on, why do employers have such an interest in this type of plan? This is where we have to talk a little bit about health care reform, and this is clearly not every rule of health care reform, but it has dramatic impact in that it gives you a way to help avoid some penalties, taxes, and fees that may be coming your way. The high deductible health plan is designed, the way we designed it, to make sure it meets the minimum essential requirements required under health care reform, and therefore you would avoid paying what we call a player pay penalty of up to $3,000 per employee. This type of account can be easily modified in future years depending on how close you are to triggering the expected significant excise tax in 2018. And I'm actually have someone here who's going to talk about this in a moment, but I'm going to preface it to say that under health care reform rules as we currently have them, we know that what we have today, the EPO and PPO, for most employers is simply not going to be sustainable by 2018 when those plan benefits above a certain amount are going to trigger an excise tax that applies certainly to you. Every plan, county, government, every plan is subject to this. If you look down there at the bottom in that yellow bar, in 2018, a single coverage plan, if it exceeds $10,200, let's just say your accrual rate for the year, the sum of it is $10,200 or more, that means that you will pay a 40% excise tax on that.
What's the current accrual rate on our EPO plan?
You know, I didn't bring... Oh. These are the county's accrual rates So I didn't prepare this, forgive me, I'm just looking at it,
Looks like it's $879.
for a single.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's a month.
So what we're talking about is these are in $13, $10,200. Okay? So whatever that dollar amount is in,
So we're already over. We're
Yes.
already over by about 400, 500 bucks.
yes, sir. Yes. And so just to show you the things that have been occurring, these things below the yellow bar are things that have been taking place year over year at rapid speed, not just by us, but for many employers, to try to manage their cost. And I won't read every one to you, but you can see the types of things that would have to occur. And those, by the way, have occurred and continue to occur, but even with that, those dollar amounts are high, or I should say low, and would trigger the tax. The other thing you have to be aware of is healthcare reform eligibility rules that become effective January 1 change the definition of a full-time employee for benefits access. In your world today, you probably have a 40-hour-a-week employee, which makes them eligible for benefits. Under healthcare reform, that number changes to 30 hours. And there's lots of models, lots of information as to how you count an employee's hours, depending if they're exempt or non-exempt, and if they're seasonal, if they're temporary. But regardless, the key component of healthcare reform was the mandated coverage piece. Everybody must have healthcare insurance or pay a penalty. And so it's one way to get more people covered under a healthcare plan is to lower the hours under which people must work in order to qualify. So the expanded definition applies to who you offer benefits to, those who work 30 hours or more. When you offer a high-deductible health plan with an HSA account, that account, the account portion of the account-based plan, can be adjusted up or down to help be the cushion between that $10,200 and your actual cost. So because the health care reform laws require health savings account, flexible spending account to be included as a medical plan cost, that amount can be adjusted up or down. So it does help benefit the employer and ultimately the employee by avoiding that 40% penalty that you would have to pay. And we can come back to that too if we need to. I mentioned I had somebody here from Towers Watson, Adam Eichstadt from Towers Watson in Dallas, the practice leader with Towers Watson is here. And I've asked Adam to perhaps walk you through the slide that you're seeing right now in connection with the excise tax. Adam?
Thanks, Diana. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The exhibit on slide 9 illustrates the impact of the excise tax on Tarrant County. And as Diana was referencing earlier, the excise tax is a 40% penalty on the total value of the employer-sponsored health care benefit over specified thresholds. And again, those thresholds are $10,200 for single coverage, $27,500 for family coverage. And those are the thresholds in 2018, and they do increase over time, which we'll talk about in just a second here.
Okay, the 40% apply to the difference?
Yes.
To the total amount minus the threshold?
Exactly. Okay. So it's 40% applied to the amount over the threshold.
And is that assessed against the individual or against the county?
Against the plan sponsor. So it would be the county's responsibility. But certainly that's, a large consideration for employers is once they do hit that excise tax, what do they do with it? And clearly most employers are thinking that that's a cost that will eventually be passed along back to the plan participants through increased contributions. But it is the responsibility of the plan sponsor.
Or decreased salary expenses, salary increases.
Exactly right, as you think about kind of the total rewards package, total compensation. It's an additional expense on the bottom line.
The word non-deductible doesn't apply to
Correct. Correct. And the graph at the bottom shows you the actual dollar, the projected dollar impact of the excise tax on Tarrant County. So in 2018, you can see that the projected excise tax would be almost $4.6 million. And that increases rather rapidly over time to a total of close to $21 million in 2025.
And the reason for the increase is because the increase in the floor or the determination amount is CPI plus 1%, whereas medical inflation is probably estimated at what, 5.5% to 6%?
Closer to 8, actually. But you're exactly right. So those thresholds are increasing at 2 to 3% per year, while your health care costs are going up at 6 to 8% per year. So that excise tax tends to grow exponentially over time. So once you hit it, it does grow rapidly.
So in 2018, we would be writing a check to the federal government for 4.5 or almost $4.6 million.
That's exactly right. Based on the way your plans are currently designed today and with projected cost increases in the future.
But the increase of that baseline, is CPI and 1% in 19, but in 20 it goes back to just CPI.
Yes.
And so you don't even get the 1%.
That is correct. So you've got the disconnect between the increase in the threshold and the increase in your health care costs, which just exacerbates the problem over time. And so, to Diana's points earlier, it really is about how do you mitigate, long-term health care cost trends? How do you shrink the total health care cost pie? And there's only so much you can do from a pure plan design perspective, and it really is, the focus of employers is around changing employee behavior, changing the behavior of plan participants, helping them to become better consumers of health care coverage. That's really the way to combat the excise tax in the long run. And it really is about a long-run point of view on this. I think the good news for you all is that you've done a lot of work around considering this for this year. I mean, this takes time. When you talk about changing employee behaviors, that doesn't happen overnight. And it really does take time for those to gain traction and to really implement those and start to see the return on those types of changes. And so the fact that you've got 5 years between now and 2018, you really need that time period in order to impact the types of things that you need to change to mitigate these costs and to try and deflect some of this potential penalty in the future.
In the besides collecting more money for the federal government, what is the logic in the framework of healthcare? What is the logic behind the excise tax?
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, you hit on a key one, is a revenue raiser to pay for expanded access under healthcare reform. Number two, the philosophy really is around trying to dampen the richness of healthcare plans. So the federal government really wants plan participants to have more skin in the game. They want to have them more responsible for upfront healthcare costs, to force them to become better consumers and better utilizers of healthcare. That really is the philosophy, the underlying philosophy behind the excise tax.
So essentially, it's a mandate to force a shared responsibility between employers and employees.
Certainly. That's one way to look at it.
Which is
absolutely
essentially the objective of the health saving account.
Yes, in terms of enhancing consumerism, absolutely.
Well, Adam, we may come back to you in just a second,
Thank
if
you.
that's okay. While we're on the topic of healthcare reform, I just wanted to remind folks who maybe haven't been at our committee meetings that, we already have fees that are in place as a result of healthcare reform. This July, you'll be paying a fee called the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Fee. It's not that significant. Actually, it's $1 per covered member for everybody that was employed on the plan or enrolled in the plan in 2012. So each employee, spouse, and dependent in 2012. In 2014, you will be paying $2 per covered member for that fee. Additionally, in 2014, you'll be paying what we call a transitional reinsurance program fee. And that actually is a revenue-raising fee at $63 per member. Each man, woman, and child enrolled on your EPO or PPO or whatever our health plans are. And so the sum of the two is $65 in 2014 that you'll be paying. The transitional reinsurance program fee is designed for, just as you mentioned, Commissioner Wynn, you know, people will be in these plans that perhaps weren't in plans before all over the country, and because pre-existing conditions won't apply, you're all familiar with stop-loss coverage that we have through the PBC, that once a claim hits a certain amount, we have stop-loss coverage. Well, to fund the federal government's stop-loss coverage, that's that transitional reinsurance program fee.
That's the $63.
That's the $63 plus $2 for the patient-centered outcomes fee. The sum of the two is $65 for every.
The $2 is to what, fund the activities of the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute?
Bingo. You're absolutely right. And the goal of that research institute is to, again, one of the components of healthcare reform is to try to determine how to reduce costs, how to make outcomes more effective, ultimately reducing costs. That's the goal of that $2. But you're absolutely right. Okay?
But the $65 will be collected over the next 3 years, starting 2014, correct?
Actually, it's going to be collected for, yes, that's true, and it will ultimately over 5 years, I believe. Is that correct? 5 years?
Yes, and the transitional reinsurance fee is over 3 years, so it's through 2016.
Okay. So, and then the intent is for that fee to go away. Whether it will go away or not, we don't know.
Sure it will.
But
Good luck.
Just like that stop-loss fee is supposed to go, what's going to pay for the stop-loss? I guess it's going to be our $4.6 million.
Possibly.
We don't change.
The transition reinsurance program fee, the $63, it's estimated that our payment next year is going to be approximately $321,000.
Now, I know we can't do this, but I guess if we were not insuring anybody, then our cost would be $3,000 per employee. But then we wouldn't have to pay the $63 because we wouldn't have any employees that were insured.
Yeah, there's additional pieces to that. But one thing I can tell you is, I mean, certainly that's an option, and, then, there would be other
Ramifications.
Ramifications is a good term. That's a better term than I probably would have used, but that's absolutely correct.
We pay $3,000, and then everybody goes into the exchange, which, in effect, what this 10,200 doing is it's dumbing down the plans to maybe come closer to mirroring what the exchanges are going to offer.
Well, the exchanges, there's various versions of exchange plans, depending on, again, what an
Since we're going to be
employee
on the
wants.
federal one, since our state isn't doing one, then
That's
we
right.
would be on the federal exchange.
And there are different versions of that. So it depends on which one is used as the cost basis. But I do know that as we come out every summer or early summer and talk about accrual rates for the following year, we will actually be including that $65 in your costs to make sure that those funds are being collected throughout the year.
Are the federal exchanges, are any of them out there to the point to where we could compare our plan to the federal exchanges to see what the differences are?
I don't know that they're final yet. I think they're still in development. I think there's,
When are they supposed to go into effect?
January 1.
So they're still in the implementation stage, even though they're going into effect in less than 9 months, or I guess a little over 9 months.
Right.
That's nice.
Okay. So now let's put on our employee hats. We're all employees somewhere, so in this room, I suspect. So why would an employee be attracted to this plan? And again, I emphasize, not every employee will be attracted to this plan, but there are some that clearly will be attracted to it. One reason is the account rolls over from year to year. As we've mentioned, no use it or lose it rules. The individual owns the account, so it's portable. When an employee terminates employment, the account goes with them. Assets are being created through HSAs, kind of like in this country how 401ks have built asset bases. It's a similar type thing. Employees can choose through various investment vehicles to invest some of those dollars if they choose to. They don't have to. They can just save it. We do know that about 40% of covered individuals either save the money or spend less than half of their account in any given year. The investment options available would be those offered by the HSA vendor. We have 2 qualified vendors. They have to be approved and qualified by the IRS, already contracted at the PBC, United Healthcare and Payflex. And both of those offer HSA management, both have approved investment options, et cetera, that the committee will be getting more information about. An employee might also be attracted to this because it allows them to save money to cover future expenses, including those expenses during retirement. And so if you think about it, if somebody got into one next year and they worked here, as you mentioned, Commissioner, long-term employees, over time, you can imagine the asset base that they will have built. And when they retire, those dollars go with them. And so it can pay for expenses during retirement. Now, an HSA is one of the only triple tax protection vehicles, meaning contributions into the account are pre-tax or tax-free. The funds grow pre-tax or tax-free. And when you pull them out to reimburse yourself for qualified medical expenses, they're also tax-free.
Who determines how they're invested?
The accounts, the 2 vendors have accounts that have been approved through the IRS, and like a mutual fund, there's a list of accounts that people can select, look at their performance, and choose which accounts they wish to invest in if they choose to invest part of their funds.
Do we have somebody who's going to teach all of our employees how to be better healthcare consumers? I mean, we're going to have classes, or is there going to be like an 800 number you can call and, hey, I'm in the doctor's office and he wants to do this or that. What should I do? I mean,
Well, you know, Commissioner Fickes, those are such great questions. First of all, to your last
I'm
point,
looking for answers.
you have that today. You have a nurse line number today you can call. I'm in the doctor's office. What should I do? They have access to cost information, vendor information, provider information. You have that today. But to your first point, absolutely. I mean, I'll come back to that in a moment because, as I mentioned, the communication piece of this is so significant and so important.
But what I think is that right now there's no incentive for you as an employee to call because it's not going to change what you pay. In the future, you're now paying it out of your account. It's your money. If you don't spend it, you keep it. And so you may pick up that phone and call that nurse and say, look, this doctor's saying that I need to go get an MRI, and his MRI is going to cost me $1,500. And do you have a cheaper one? And they're going to say, yeah, we might be able to go around the corner and get one for $500.
Exactly right.
And so now you're going to be a little bit more conscious of what that drug costs you or what that, and you're going to, and yeah, is it going to be a big education? As Diana mentioned earlier, it is going to be a tremendously big education process. And if folks don't take advantage of the education, then, they're going to be spending their money.
As I mentioned, the funds go in, can grow, and can be pulled out for qualified medical expenses, all tax-free to the employee. The piece I also want to mention is that for a retiree, for an early, let me say this differently, for a pre-65 retiree, for example, they can actually use those dollars once they retire to pay for premium and for other expenses that may actually be a significant amount by a certain point in time. So there's lots of information depending on each person's individual situation that would have a scenario that they might want to look at depending on.
One of the things to kind of keep, Debbie, how much, I know in some years in the past, we had forfeitures in the Section 125 in excess of $500,000.
That's long over, but last fiscal year, they were $291,000. They've been paying about 60% of that wellness service cost.
So that $291,000 that has been being forfeited would go away. It would stay in the employee's account from that perspective, but it would no longer be something that comes back to the county to fund our wellness program or some of our administrative costs associated with the flex or with some of those types of things.
Well, and so, therefore, if we plan on keeping our wellness activities to the level that they are, that's another $200,000 to $300,000 that'll be added to the overall cost.
Yes.
The thing is that the PPO, the non-high deductible plan, the PPO, it will still have an FSA. And so there may be, they still may have an FSA. And it will at least put a little money in there. It's not going to be the $290,000, but you will have a little money in there.
But even our HSA high deductible account can have an FSA.
Yeah, we're going to
for a
come
few
to that
things.
actually, Judge, where we talk about a little bit about the limited purpose FSA.
Could-
But let me just
could I-
kind of add to what
Excuse
Debbie
me,
was.
Diane.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Fickus had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm
There.
Good.
Could y'all get some data on the number of employees who are, say, grade 17 or below, who participate in the Section 125 program?
Well, everybody participates.
Well, add additional money over the 240 that we give them.
You have a total of 1,300, as of March 1, 1,326 employees who contribute a total of $1.4 million.
I'm trying to get a handle on how
Their
many
salary.
of our lower
Right.
paid employees
Right.
contribute of their own dollars into that plan. Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah.
expect that you'd have it,
Okay.
but I'd like to have it. Thank you.
So now let's talk a little bit about the summary of enrollment options. What would it look like at annual enrollment potentially? First of all, an employee who wants to enroll in the high deductible health plan with an HSA, there's a requirement by the IRS that they not have any other medical coverage. So, under IRS rules, a flexible spending account counts as other medical coverage. So this means what we're talking about for those who enroll in the high deductible health plan, remember they'll have a health savings account, an HSA. So therefore they can't have a general flexible spending account like the employee would in the PPO plan. However, it would not stop them from electing what we call a limited purpose FSA. That would be for the limited purpose of reimbursing dental and vision expenses. And once they hit their high deductible health plan deductible, their coinsurance amount. And with that, that means that an employee could feasibly elect up to $2,500 for that purpose if they're enrolled in the high deductible health plan. So you can see at the bottom there where it shows the 2013 account limits. Under the FSA plan, the federal government limits that election to $2,500 a year. That would not change in 2014, except that it may go up based on whatever their index is. It could go up a little bit. But under today's rules, it's $2,500. Today's rules for a health savings account for a single individual, $3,250. So if an individual wanted to, they could have a $3,250 account tax protected, and they could also have a up to $2,500 in a limited purpose flex account only for the purpose of dental, vision, and coinsurance above the deductible. That would also be an excellent spot to deposit if you are an employer who contributes wellness rewards or something similar. If you wanted to give that to everybody in a limited purpose, you can. But technically, the Any deposit of that nature for somebody in the high deductible health plan would have to go into the limited purpose, unless it's seed money.
Give me an example of where I would be paying medical expenses above the deductible.
So if you're a single person, you have a $1,500 deductible, that $1,000 until you reach $2,500, when the plan becomes a 100% plan?
100%, so it's the $1,000.
Yes, yes, sir. Now, you may not know that you need that up
But that
front.
FSA would be forfeitable.
That FSA is forfeitable. So, you know, if we were to give a couple of scenarios when somebody in the high deductible health plan might want to do that, it would be, one, somebody who is expecting to have, for example, significant dental work done. Usually, people plan for that. So if implants, which are terribly expensive, you could have money there. You could still use your HSA if you wanted to, but you would have reserved money there. Or if you wanted to structure it to start toward the end of the plan year, if you know you can finish it up before the end of the plan year, you could use it, or you could use it toward that $1,000.
Okay.
So there's ways to time it that we want to help people understand.
So it will work to pay the out-of-pocket, it won't work to pay the deductible.
Correct.
Okay.
It's above the deductible.
Why wouldn't you just put it in the HSA?
Well, you could, except the maximum is $3,250. So, an employer could do that, but it's not seed money.
Ideally, you'd want to put it you'd want to maximize both, pay for it out of the flexible spending account so that you could keep it in the HSA and leave it and have it carry forward.
Absolutely. You can help people learn how to save that money.
That's a professional CPA tax advice.
Yeah, and I
Thank you,
didn't even
Judge.
charge you an hourly rate for that.
The bill's in the mail, right? We will be talking at our next committee meeting about the limited purpose FSA because we want people to understand why that is an important component of this, that it's relatively easy for us to implement. And then, of course, the medical plan choices for an employee would be high deductible health plan with an HSA with the option of a limited purpose FSA, probably your lowest cost price plan to an employee, dramatically lower. A PPO with the option of an FSA, same as today, or you still have people who can opt out of medical coverage with proof of other coverage. The reason I put TBA on there, or to be announced, is because, if somebody is on, for example, TRICARE today, and they're allowed to opt out, the county contributes some opt-out funds to their flex account. Well, TRICARE is another medical plan. So anybody on TRICARE certainly would not be eligible to enroll in the high deductible health plan because they wouldn't be able to give up or wouldn't want to give up their TRICARE benefits. So it's that type of thing. There are some things that we want to make sure people know. So opt out if somebody wants to opt out of the plan. If their husband is on TRICARE elsewhere and they are covered under that plan, they also cannot enroll on your high deductible health plan with an HSA.
For example, let's say, for example, that we go to the high deductible health plan and I enroll and my wife, who works for another company, stays under her coverage and it's not a high deductible plan, then I can still have an HSA, but she cannot.
Correct.
If she, however, is in a high deductible plan herself and her other employer, then we could each have an HSA, or could we have one single HSA that we deposit money into and pay out for both of us?
Technically, you could have both, but it would depend on what the employer's contributions are. You'd want to maximize that. But the key is that you cannot be covered under your spouse's plan.
Right.
So we want to make sure people understand if you have access to other coverage, more important than ever is this concept of let's show you how you analyze these two plans you may have available to you. Because today, people, frankly, sometimes just say, I'll just take what I had last year without seeing what's changed. Well, if you're married and your spouse works and has health coverage, multiply that by 2. And so now we want to say, okay, take a look at both and let's see what you're first eligible for, to what makes the most sense given your circumstances, and then let's make sure best cost is followed.
And are amounts that are in my HSA account, can I only spend them on me, or can I also use that account to reimburse for expenses out of pocket on her?
If she's not covered under an HSA, I'm going to look to you here, Adam.
Right, so she would have to be covered under a eligible health plan. If she was covered under a different one, I don't think that you use your HSA funds to pay for those expenses.
But if I had a limited FSA account,
Then you could. For medical, dental, for vision and dental.
okay.
Okay. So we've talked about some of this already, but due to IRS requirements, there are certain other elements of the benefits package that we may need to modify. We were talking about wellness rewards earlier, where those funds would go, the strategies to be used in those cases. We'll definitely be working on those. And we also know, this is the part that I said I was going to talk about at the end, although it's just terribly placed. We do know that the success of this hinges on a strong communication strategy. We absolutely want to make sure that we're achieving participant engagement and behavior change, not just explaining, here's your new benefits. So to do that, and knowing the information can be complex, and there could be different rules that would impact them, whether the benefits are covered by your plan or by the spouse's plan or by a government plan, we absolutely recognize this is a critical, critical piece. Timing is important. We're not going to be able to just stand up and say, here's everything you ever needed to know, now go enroll. We need to use a phased-in approach to introduce this change, which is another reason why we're starting early. We know we're going to be addressing multiple audiences at varied levels. We absolutely will. We do it a lot, but even more so now because we really want to incent people to attend these sessions, which may be face-to-face, may be webinars. Some people like only computers. Some may want mail information, some all of the above. We do know absolutely there's going to be a variety and a mix of venues and messaging so that people have more opportunity to understand. We know that prompting individuals to change how they purchase their health care benefits and improve their health is a key component, as I mentioned earlier. And the last item on here probably should have been at the very top of the presentation, but I save it for last because sometimes, even in this abbreviated session, it's sometimes hard to understand this for many people, but we know leadership engagement and visibility with this is key for employees to accept the change. And when I talk about that, I'm also talking about, there are so many pieces even for leadership that they may not remember at the moment they're called on or when they run into somebody. So even providing talking points or frequently asked questions that could be changing from time to time based on healthcare reform, and even healthcare reform to the extent it applies to the benefits. This messaging is all going to happen at the same time. And so it's a real opportunity, since we're having to deliver that message and explain those changes, to really educate people how to use their plans to their best advantage, and two, to make sure that this change is viewed in the context in which it's intended. So our next steps, the additional detail is what I'm providing to you today, the on-site meeting. It's not the only time I'll be here, as I mentioned, but it's the one that will occur before our next PBC committee meeting and board meeting. And our committee will meet next week to talk about any remaining considerations, to bring some feedback to our group. And we plan to compile that feedback so that when our Board of Governors considers that on April 24th, they can consider the committee recommendation and also hear the feedback, because we want people to make sure everyone understands it is a complex change, but one that has potential enormous benefit. So that's the story for today.
Questions? So we don't have any, right now, we don't have any indication as to when any of these exchanges are going to be rolled out, and we know any of the benefit coverage in any of those exchanges.
You know, Judge, are you asking because you're wanting to see
I want
perhaps
to see a comparison of what those
comparison?
exchanges look like in comparison
Yeah.
to what we're currently providing.
Yeah. That as well as potential penalties that would assess alongside.
Well, the penalty is $3,000. I thought, when did it go from two? I thought originally the penalty was $2,000.
Well, there's penalties for different things. The player pay penalty is up to $3,000. And it depends on whether or not the employee is eligible for a subsidy. Remember, we have the affordability test as well. And the affordability test, one more reason for the account-based health plan, it would be priced low enough. It can't exceed 9.5% of income, quote unquote, which is, keep me honest here, Adam, box 1 of the W-2 form? Okay. So that being said, we don't know what your box 1 W-2 form number is, but that penalty is also factored in. But to your question, you know, I think we could probably give some, here's what we're seeing if we don't have one finished by the time we talk again. Here's likely, we don't know the cost for sure. The cost could be much, much higher than people expect. You know, different penalties for behaviors are allowable in the exchanges. So we don't know the final cost yet. There are navigators that are currently now being trained and information discussed to help people navigate through the exchange. There's quite a lengthy application that has to be completed by everybody going into the exchange. I understand it's somewhere around 20 pages or so, and quite complex, so they're working on trying to pare that down. And so there's lots of things going on. So I think we could probably get down to, though, this is what we're seeing right now, this is what we think could happen, here's the ranges, so it'll help give you some context around that.
Well, I will say one of the things that concerns me, especially given what you just said about a 20-page application, is I do believe that there are a lot of employers who may say, hey, look, $3,000 is a bargain. If I can pay $3,000 and cover or not cover my employees, then all those employees are then going to be forced to fill out a 20-page application. We better get JPS's doors open, because those folks are not going to fill out the application. And so all this, we're going to force you into an exchange. What happens if you don't fill out the application? Are you in the exchange or not?
Yeah. And, you know, those are all the questions that are being discussed. I'm going to ask Adam to step up again, too, because he could probably give you some information as to what they're seeing or hearing from employers who are asking these very questions. Do we dump it and go to the exchange, or what do we do?
And I mean, I know we're not going to dump it and go to the exchange, but I think that there are a number of employers who are going to say, why should I mess with this? And I'm, you know, it's kind of like, well, if you're not covered by your employer, you're automatically in the exchange. So what's going to happen when they don't fill out the 20-page application?
You know, I actually, before we respond to that, yesterday saw the information in the Federal Register of a comment on what exempts somebody from having to have mandated coverage. And interestingly enough, U.S. citizenship is one of the items that will exempt people.
If you don't have it, you don't have to.
It's up for comment. It's not final. And enrollment in a government-based plan like Medicare, Medicaid CHIPS, enrollment in a veterans plan, TRICARE, Department of Veterans Affairs. Those are folks that no matter what, they're not going to be tested, but they are going to be challenged to show citizenship if they're wanting to get coverage through the exchange. So I don't know what you read into all that. I just thought it was interesting that that was one of the components of that published yesterday. But Adam, are you seeing employers who are questioning whether or not they should go into the exchange and just large employers?
That's a great question. And when we talk to employers across the country, and when we look at our survey data, the vast majority of employers are stating that they will continue to sponsor benefit programs. So if you look at our most recent survey data, it's 5% or less of employers that are considering exiting their programs and paying the penalty. But I'll caveat that by saying that that is really a short-term decision. So that's for 2014, 2015, and I think it's a different long-term decision.
Until such time as the penalty catches up with the premium.
Yeah, the penalty catches up, or I think as employers really get more certainty around what these exchanges are going to look like, what types of benefits are offered out there, what's the quality of the coverage, just how does healthcare delivery itself evolve over time. When they get more comfortable with the delivery system, then I think that will put them in a better position to make long-term decisions about whether they continue to sponsor coverage or they exit and pay the penalty.
What are you hearing about? I mean, what are you hearing about the benefits covered under the exchanges? Have you seen anything? Is federal government giving you any indication as to when they might publish what these exchanges are going to look like?
Yes, really no indication. Enrollment is supposed to be in the fall. To Diana's point, I think that the number one thing that we don't know is what the cost is going to look like from a premium perspective.
Is this going to be kind of like the bill? Go ahead and apply for it, and we'll tell you later what we're covering?
Yeah, we do know kind of what the basics of the coverage look like. So we know what the actuarial values look like out on the exchange. So there will be basically 4 plans offered: a 60% plan, a 70% plan, an 80% plan, and a 90% plan.
What do you mean by 60? I mean deductible?
No, so the actuarial value that relates back to your the numbers Diana was showing you earlier, where your PPO was in the basically the 80% range, and your EPO today is in the 90% range. The plans on the exchange will have standardized actuarial values ranging from 60% to 90%, and so you can enroll in the silver plan or the bronze plan. So you'll have standardized coverage values. But again, we don't have any idea, what that looks like from a cost perspective. And I will say the other thing about the exchanges, not every carrier is going to participate in all 50 exchanges across the country. So whether you're a United Healthcare or an Aetna, those organizations are deciding where they will be on the exchange. So we don't know what the choice will look like on each of the state-based exchanges, and we don't know what other types of cost mitigating types of tactics will be implemented into those plans. So, for example, will there be narrow, limited provider panels on the plans in the exchange to try and mitigate costs? Will there be additional health management and wellness types of incentives to control long-term costs? So it's a lot of those details that we simply don't know what that looks like.
So if the 90%, let's just say we said our plan was somewhere in the 90% range. So if the plan on the exchange was the 90%, and it very closely mirrored what our plan was with United Healthcare, let's say, for example, who happens to be our carrier and would have contracts similar to what they currently have, maybe or maybe not. Then in order to enroll in that plan, then an employee would have to basically pay whatever the premium was for that, whatever that 90% plan was.
That's exactly right. Essentially pay the full premium unless they're eligible for a federal subsidy.
Okay, now what would happen? Are we precluded? If we were to take that cost plus the penalty that we have to pay, and it still be far less than what our accrual was, could we offer to pay a portion of the employee's premium to enroll in that plan, and us not cover them, but we pay our penalty, we pay that, the employee actually come out paying less for similar coverage? Is there anything that precludes us from doing that? And could we set up an HSA for them under that type of scenario?
So on the HSA piece, that have to be covered under high deductible health plans, so there's certain rules around that. So you likely wouldn't be eligible for the HSA.
But if the federal government is a high deductible health plan, would that be a...
potentially, so that participant could set up their own HSA.
And we could contribute to it.
And you could potentially contribute to it. But I would say the factor that might preclude you there is just what those total premiums look like out on the exchange. I would say it's fairly unlikely that the exchange premium plus the penalty is going to be less than what you're paying today. Again, I think the only circumstance that would work is if you had an individual at the county who is potentially eligible for those federal subsidies. So if your plan is unaffordable for that person exceeding the 9.5% threshold that Diana mentioned earlier. Then if they go out to the exchange and they get a federal subsidy, well, it might be cheaper for them and it might be better for the county in the aggregate.
And then there would be a penalty just because they're enrolled with.
Exactly. That would trigger the $3,000 penalty. So it's really more on an individual basis, and it's that type of a strategy might work for a segment of your population, but I would say, the population at whole, it probably wouldn't be applicable just because I think those total premium rates on the exchanges, especially when you add in the potential penalties from an employer perspective, are going to be more than what you're paying today.
It'll be interesting.
Absolutely.
We don't have any information right now. United, do you think United and the major employers have already, or the major healthcare providers have already put together their 60, 70, 80, 90% plans for the exchanges? Have they submitted those?
I don't know if they've been finalized and submitted, but I know they're working on it, and I know they're, certainly this is something they've been working on for a couple of years, right, in terms of designing what those plans look like and the different types of strategies that they build into those plans to try and mitigate costs and really to be competitive on those exchanges. You're placing your plan, right next to an Aetna plan or a Blue Cross plan, and how do you be price competitive, when the benefits or the richness of the benefits is ostensibly the same?
Well, and one of the challenges they have is that the exchanges, for all intents and purposes, they were intended for those that don't have any other option for health coverage. They weren't really intended for employer plans. Now, whether or not that should be considered as an employer plan, I'm not saying that's good or bad. But as a result, you look at a carrier like United, they, of course, know that they're going to probably have a number of people enrolled that don't have any access to plans. And then, I'm not speaking for United, but just knowing a little bit about how they operate, they're going to look at their book of business. And in what states are those book of business operated, and are they national and go among all states? Or do most of them center in certain states? And they're going to be very strategic in picking those states. I'm not aware of any carrier that's covering the nation. Are you?
No.
No.
But see, what's going to be interesting is since you're requiring everybody to buy insurance, except for those folks, I'm still real concerned about how this 25-page or 20-page application is going to work. If you're required to buy it,
You have to complete that so that they know what you qualify for. That's the whole intent of that.
I understand that. So somebody who doesn't want to have the insurance in the first place, the same people who are out there uninsured because they don't want to pay any kind of premium, tell me what the incentive is going to be for them to fill out that 20-page application.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that we're hearing lots of complaints about that 20-page application. And one more piece to consider is that not only is it a case of the application itself, but the piece that I've left out of this is, because it's still in discussion phase, how is it that the government is going to know the federal government is going to know which of your employees have coverage through the exchange, number one, and number two, with or without a subsidy? How are they going to know that? Well, they're going to know that because there's going to be a new administrative requirement that you give them the list of everybody that you cover and how much that coverage costs and at what level. And, we
What
have
you
a
call
whole
a W-2.
Well, no, a separate reporting process outside the W-2 because they're going to be matching up to see who's on the exchange, who has a subsidy, and by the way, here's your bill for your penalty. So it's that type of thing that is still under development.
They got 9 months. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay.
What about the estimated cost of the high deductible plan comparing to the cost of the current EPO and PPO? I'm talking about total cost.
When we do first of all, I'm going to answer that in two parts. When we do your accruals this summer, we will be actually looking at just Tarrant County's costs historically and projecting forward and determining what that plan might look like in terms of cost. But regardless, you have more control over the cost in this first year than ever because of that seed money component. That will absolutely be a portion of that. And that seed money component can be increased or decreased depending on how close you're getting to that cap. Now, obviously, the cap isn't in place yet. But we're obviously every year going to be looking at, one, how do we mitigate penalties, and two, if this was 2018, what would we be looking at today so that we can absolutely project forward? We only have a few years left here.
And the $354 million of unfunded liability that we had on this year's balance sheet will, next time, GASB's going to require us to put the present value of this estimated liability down here at the bottom, which just through 2025 is about another $100 million. Yeah, I kind of shake my head too.
I have a question. Just a simple one, really. Have you all seen where you have a plan similar to a PPO and an HSA in the market, where you have one company that has those two type of plans together? And if so, do you find that they price the HDHP at a lower monthly premium to the employees versus the PPO, or are they basically the same?
You asking me?
Either one.
She's asking either one of y'all who's brave enough to answer.
I happen to know that. I know a local answer in a governmental unit that absolutely was differential. And the seed money did not survive. I mean, they had a PPO, a group just a little bit smaller than you, had a PPO and a high deductible with an HSA. United Healthcare was the vendor. And the seed money was there for maybe 4 or 5 years. And the seed money actually started reducing after year 3 a little bit, and then they gave a couple years' notice that it would be ending, trying to get employees to seed themselves. So, but the premium itself is significantly less.
Really?
For the high deductible.
Was that a driver then that pushed people into the HDHP?
I'm still going to have some more conversations with that group. I will certainly bring that question up.
That would be very interesting.
I can tell you that their whole point was a behavior change. They were driven toward that more than trying to drive people into a high deductible plan.
Did they have more people then move into the HDHP?
Over time.
Debbie, do you have enough information to guesstimate how many of our employees will exceed that 9.5% affordability threshold?
We actually ran a test using, I don't have it with me, but it was using a monthly premium of $100. And none of your employees really triggered that penalty.
Is $100 a month a reasonable assumption?
Well, I mean, all of our groups have different rates that they charge their employees, but we tested it on $100 and it was just getting close, but using $100.
-6 is the employee contribution for employee only.
Employee only is $91 on the PPO.
And that could change a little bit, Commissioner, but we're testing for that as well. I wouldn't have the payroll info, and we weren't using, by the way, when we ran that number, we were not using box 1 W-2 earnings. We were using salaries at 12/31. So it actually could be, a little bit right on the edge.
And the other thing that we don't take into account right now with the accrual, and I don't know how the federal government, since we are a self-insured plan, we accrue at one amount. That may not be what our actual costs are. And so I don't know if there's not right now, as I understand it, a current reconcilement between what our accrual is and what our actual costs are. The costs would be the, quote unquote, the richness of the benefit plan. But if we set our accrual at such a level as to build a reserve, then in effect, we're penalizing ourselves to the tune of the excise penalty.
Correct. And I say, that's one of the areas where there's very little guidance around that, so we would certainly expect some more guidance from the federal government in terms of the actuarial process to go to. But, as it stands today, you're absolutely right.
As it stands today, the accrual rate is, for all intents and purposes, the number that you would use. So
if we accrued at 500 at the end of the year, had to write a big check, how do we calculate the determination of the plan?
well, you'd be writing the big check for next year, not last year.
Not if we had enough reserves in there.
Well, that's true. Yeah, it definitely is an issue that we don't have firm answers to, but the information that we do have, accrual rate or quote-unquote COBRA rates without the 2%, which to you is the accrual rate, that's the number that they're throwing out there, and I don't think that's even finalized yet.
So the goal would be for us to accrue as much as we can between now and 2018, so that in 2018 we take our accrual rate down to the point to where we don't have a rich plan, and we just pay for it out of our reserves so that we save ourselves these millions of dollars every year.
That could be one strategy, except we'd have to balance that with the affordability tests and the other tests which kick in 2014. So, yeah.
There's planning opportunities here.
To say the least.
But I wanted to make sure that you had just a high-level picture of what we're talking about, and maybe we'll be having a afternoon meeting on Monday.
And again, I think this is all a part of our overall benefits thing. And again, what we've been talking about, looking at is not only that today we've focused on pretty much active employees, although a lot of this could also transfer over to our retirees from a standpoint. Can we make HSA contributions to retirees, or do they have to be active employees?
You can make an RRA, don't you?
You
Say
can
again?
make a HRA or what we call an RRA contribution. There are ways to put contributions in pre-65 retiree coffers, and then there are other models that are coming out as well, as far as, you pay a vendor X amount, and there's a whole menu of plan that a retiree could choose from with the assistance of an advocate that would help them.
And that would be, you're saying pre-65, but what about post-65?
And post-65. Is there any other questions?
I guess just along that lines, what you're saying is we could do one, even with the retired would be just for the retirees. We're not required to match active employees if we're doing something for the retired employees.
The thing to consider there too is that all I would say is in the retiree world, you probably need about a 2-year lead time for the education, communication component, where with active employees, it could be a lesser period. And then, just as we're talking about this, those new models that are coming out are certainly an option that we should be talking about here very soon.
On the retiree piece, on the retiree piece, what we've talked about today, that changes totally for retirees because we're talking about insurance for active employees today, right? And retiree insurance, so we fund entire retiree insurance. We don't have to follow the same ACA guidelines as for retirees as we do for actives.
Correct.
Does that depend upon whether or not they're post-65 or pre-65?
All we have to do by state law is to give the pre-65s access to our plans. We don't have to fund any of those. And we don't have to give 65 or older access to our plans because at that point they qualify for Medicare. And we use the term 65 and older, but Medicare qualified employees, because there are some employees that are younger, or retirees that may be younger than 65 that qualify for Medicare.
But are we required on the post-65 to at least make those other plans available for their dependents who may be pre-65?
No.
I don't think so. No. I don't think the statute ever talks about it only talks about employees, it doesn't talk about families.
Yeah, you're not required to do anything for any family or dependent under any of those plans.
You know, one of the things that we've talked about prior to today is that while we're talking about active employees today, and in a week or two, we're going to be talking to you all about the Hay survey that we did. Remember, on the salary issue, we did both salary and benefits. And then we're also going to talk to you about retiree health care. And when you look at it, you really can't, it's difficult to pull those three apart and deal with them separate because they're all interconnected to a certain extent. So we're going to continue these discussions. We're going to continue these discussions and add more factors into it as we go along. It's a complex issue, but it's something that we figured that in a work session form is the best way first to educate our court members and then to develop a strategy on how we move forward.
And this is being videoed and available for our employees to watch if they'd like to.
This is being videoed when we're in this room.
Okay. Well, we're in this room, so.
Well, I understand that, but the reason I say that is
that's the reason we did not go back to 504C.
If we went to 504C, it would
not have been able to be videoed. Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
So this will remain a part of today's meeting
Yes, it is part of it. It's part of the minutes of.
because we have not yet adjourned. Okay.
Do we have a work session next Tuesday?
Tina, when were we going to bring the Hay group back, Hay study back? I mean, bring it back to court. Two weeks.
Okay.
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe that's all we have. If there's no further questions from the court.
You sure? It's already 3 o'clock. We might as well stay here till 5. Come up with another.
Many of us are going to be here till 5 anyway.
You have set a record today, Judge.
I know.
Sure. I'm excited.
I think, unfortunately, there may be a record that will be easily broken in the weeks to come. There being no further business at this time, we're adjourned.
How are you?